Hey movie lovers all over the world, you already know who it is. It's your favorite internet sweaty, your boy Mikey Savage 21, bringing you another movie review. And today is actually going to be a little bit different. I'm actually going to be doing some flashback reviews in honor of Despicable Me 3, which comes out today actually, and actually releases wide tomorrow. I'm actually going to be going back and looking at Despicable Me 1 and Despicable Me 2, and we're basically just going to analyze them, and I'm just going to give you guys again my brief thoughts on it. Completely non-spoilers, even though at this point everybody should have seen Despicable Me 1 and 2, but I'll imagine that you haven't. Talk about it in a non-spoiler way, and I'm not gonna talk about Minions either, because Minions again I think deserves its own thing, even though it's a part of that franchise as well. But yeah, so basically what we're gonna do is we're gonna talk about the first one, which is Despicable Me, the first one, and it was released in 2010 from Universal Pictures and Illumination Entertainment, which basically is known as the film for putting Illumination Entertainment in the forefront at the time, because DreamWorks, Pixar, and Disney were the top animated ones, and Illumination just kind of crept in there with this first film, Despicable Me. And so the film stars the voices of Steve Carell, Jason Segel, Russell Brand, Kristen Wiig, Miranda Cosgrove, Will Arnett, and Julie Andrews, and of course I'm gonna also throw some names in there as well. The character of Edith, who is played by Dana Gaier, and of course Agnes, played by Elsie Fisher. Now basically again, the Despicable Me franchise focuses on Gru, and so this first one specifically focuses on him and wanting to become the biggest and baddest villain of them all. He basically wants to be feared and respected by everybody and doesn't put up with anybody. However, he has a problem. He is dead broke, so essentially he tries to go get a loan from the bank, which is played by Will Arnett's character of Mr. Perkins, and he tells him no. He tells him there's this new hotshot guy, Vector. So he then hatches this plan to sneak into Vector's house and steal the shrink ray, and he uses the cover of Margot, Edith, and Agnes as a way to sneak into the house. And basically that is our entire plot. Our entire plot is all about Gru, how he wants to become known as the biggest, baddest villain. He wants to steal this shrink ray and wants to use it to shrink down the moon. Now as far as the different individual characters, one of the things that I've always called Margot, Edith, and Agnes the modern day Powerpuff Girls, where Margot would obviously be Blossom because, you know, she's the oldest and obviously the leader, but she also keeps a cool head and unites her two sisters whenever they're bickering. She's always there to keep them in check. And then of course Edith would be the buttercup figure because she's like the tough middle sister and she's full of sass, but underneath her heart and exterior she does generally love her sisters. And then of course Agnes, being the youngest, she would be Bubbles because, you know, she's got that shy and sweet personality and you immediately fall in love with her as soon as you see her. And I basically would describe her as being playful and obsessed with fluffy animals and unicorns. Yes, lots and lots of unicorns. Now Kristen Wiig's character was Miss Hatty. We saw her in and out. If I had to compare her, I would say she's like Biddleman from the Like Mike movies. You might know him as the guy who basically was in charge of Calvin and all of his friends who ran the orphanage. That's exactly what Miss Hatty does. And Julie Andrews' character is not much used here. She's Marlena. She plays Gru's mother. She's always putting him down, constantly questioning his villainhood. And of course we get to our big three. We have Dr. Nefario, who is voiced by Russell Brand, who I obviously could not recognize right away because I guess he made sure his accent didn't stick out as Dr. Nefario. But he basically views Gru like his son. He tries to support him in whatever he does, and he comes up with all these kind of wacky inventions, and because he's so old, he often misinterprets what Gru says. Like, instead of the dart gun, we got a fart gun, which I'm not gonna lie, that fart gun would have came in handy. When I was younger, I would have used that thing so many times. And again, we have Vector, who is voiced by Jason Segel, and he's basically our main villain here, and he's basically Gru's ultimate test, and he's basically this rich daddy's boy figure who is like weird and quirky, but underneath all of that he's smart and he's very intelligent, and he's a good foil for Gru and his minions basically, because again Gru wants to be known as the biggest, baddest villain, and Vector has created the shrink ray and he was planning on stealing the moon. So Gru has to steal the shrink ray so he can ultimately get the moon and be claimed as the greatest villain of them all. Now one of the things that I really have loved about this entire franchise and the movie in general was how it focused in on Gru and his relationship with his quote-unquote possible daughters basically. I love how they've always focused on Margot, Edith, and Agnes and Gru's relationship, because when we first are introduced to them at the beginning of the film, you can tell that he really doesn't care for him, that he's only using them. But once they slowly start breaking down that hardened heart of his, and they start just spending more time with him, they come to love each other towards the end of the film. And that's one of the things that I loved about this first movie and the second one, and hopefully the third one, was it focused on their relationship. So for me personally, giving Despicable Me a score, I would obviously have to give this movie a 9 out of 10. I thought it was a great movie. I thought it was fantastic, and I love rewatching it anytime it pops up on Netflix or anytime it pops up on cable TV. I love watching this movie because, again, it's all about the core characters of how they interact with each other. Again, the Powerpuff Girls, which again I call them, relating to Gru, and Gru ultimately becoming this father figure and putting things aside so he can be a great father. And so what I again love is how they focus at the heart of the matter. And then the minions, you throw the minions in there, and then you make me love the movie even more because the minions are completely awesome. And I love how they also add to that dynamic of they view Gru as kind of like their head honcho, that he's ultimately their boss, but they kind of view him like the dad figure as well. So when you add the Powerpuff Girls in there with the minions, you have yourself one awesome film. What did you guys think of Despicable Me? Have you seen it? Do you plan to check it out? If you haven't already after all of these years, I recommend you go check it out. Make sure you stay tuned for Despicable Me 2, which will be dropping on Friday, and then Despicable Me 3 will be dropping on Saturday as follows. Thank you as always, and remember, as I always say, to become a savage, stay a savage, and peace out, y'all.